This is the fourth session at the Literary Pavilion that we present to you today, and we celebrate the 15th edition of the Mahindra Sanat Katha Lucknow Festival, where the many facets of Ishq are up for discourse, for discussion, for celebration, and we request you to join us in different parts of Salimpur House and the Baradari to explore, examine, and enjoy and take part. We're very grateful to the family of Raja Sahib Salimpur for opening up their home as they do every year. And Salimpur House, as you may know, is part of the larger Kaiserbagh Palace complex built by the last Nawab of Awadh, Wajid Ali Shah. This beautiful complex was once replete with gardens, water bodies, and architectural follies. In 1865, Raja Nawab Ali Khan, the Talukidar of Salimpur, was awarded this portion of Kaiserbagh. Since then, the family has been living here, dividing their time between Salimpur and Lucknow. This year, as before, we dedicate our literary sessions to the memory of the late Dr. Naseem Iqtidar Ali, who left us a few years ago. She mentored us, she mentored this festival from its very inception, and constantly nudged us to excel. Today, I'm personally thrilled to welcome Professor Fatima Rizvi, who actually needs no introduction to this space, to this audience, and to the festival. But being as she is an integral part of our lives at Sanat Katha, and but as some of you may or may not know, a very acclaimed researcher, writer, translator, and with a huge following of students at Lucknow University. It's very difficult to walk anywhere with her because it's, you know, I would imagine it's a bit like walking with Shah Rukh Khan, because every two steps you take, I'm not wrong, right? Every two steps you take, someone is greeting her and wishing her and saying, "Don't you remember me?" And of course, she remembers them all. Fatima Appa has authored a number of papers and books, and the most recent is a translation of At Home in India, along with Sufia Kidwai, Gurtilin Haidar's acclaimed novel. I'd like to welcome Professor Rizvi to tell us about the next session. Please.
Adab, Tasleem, Namaskar, and good morning. Parveen has gone too far. I'm sure I'm not even half of any of those things, lovely things she said. But it's a pleasure for us to welcome today in our midst Professor Meher Afshan Farooqi. Many of you must be familiar with her. Informally, if I may talk about her, she's the daughter of the very well-acclaimed Urdu and English critic, Shamsur Rahman Farooqi. And Meher is a wonderful friend of mine. I've known her for a long time now. And I'm really happy that she's here among us to speak to us on Ghalib. Of late, she's been studying the poet, researching him, and she's brought out one book. I'll be just talking about it. And she's also working on another book currently on him. So to introduce Professor Farooqi formally, Meher Afshan Farooqi grew up in Allahabad, India, present-day Prayagraj. A multiple gold medalist from Allahabad University, Farooqi is currently Professor of Urdu and South Asian Literature at the University of Virginia. Her research publications address complex issues of Urdu literary culture, particularly in the context of modernity. She is interested in bilingualism and how it impacts creativity. Farooqi is a very well-known translator, anthologist, and columnist. She is the editor of the pioneering 2-volume work, the Oxford India Anthology of Modern Urdu Literature, brought out by Oxford University Press in 2008. And I must vouch for it, this is a wonderful book. It's a wonderful 2-volume book. I've referred to it several times. More recently, she has published the acclaimed monograph, The Post-Colonial Mind, Urdu Culture, Islam and Modernity in Muhammad Hassan Askari. And this has been brought out by New York, Palgrave, and Oxford University Press, New Delhi, in 2013. Farooqi writes a featured column on Urdu literature, past and present, in The Dawn. She has recently published Ghalib, A Wilderness at My Doorstep, a critical biography. I think this is available outside if you are interested in it. Uh, and this has been brought out by Penguin, Alan Lane, in January 21. She is currently working on her second book on Ghalib. Meher went to the US in 1998 with a PhD in Indian medieval history. She had a temporary position at the Department of South Asian Studies at the University of Pennsylvania. She taught courses in Indian history, Indo-Persian, Urdu poetry, and Hindi. Since there were no positions in Indian medieval history, Meher reinvented herself by moving her focus from history to literature, specifically the history of North Indian literatures, particularly the convoluted history of Urdu and Hindi. She did some important translations and Urdu literary critical writings and opened up new paths for accessing Urdu literary history. Meher was offered a position to teach Urdu and Hindi literature at the University of Virginia in 2003. Following the well-known dictum, publish or perish, Meher's publishing trajectory was impressive. Meher Faruqi's success in academia is exemplary. Her regular columns published in the widely circulated English newspaper Dawn have garnered her a large following of readers and recognitions across South Asia. A very warm welcome to you, Meher, and we look forward to listening to you over the next hour. Welcome.
As Fatima mentioned, I've been working on Ghalib for the last 10 years, and I was shocked at the amount of research that I had collected. And so instead of writing one book, I had to write 2 books on Ghalib. The first book came out in 2021. It's called A Wilderness at My Doorstep. And it's all about how Ghalib wrote more in Persian than he did in Urdu, but very few people know about it. So his output in Persian is 5 times as much as his output in Urdu. And the other thing is that he was very critical of his Urdu poetry. So what he did was that when he published his Urdu poetry collection, which we call Diwan, he edited out more than half of his Urdu poetry. And that's also something that is not commonly known, and I found that, and I was very intrigued by this whole idea of bilingualism and also the selective publishing that he did. So there was a lot of things that questions that I asked, and I searched for answers. And I decided then to write a second book which will focus on Ghalib's poetry that he did not include in his Diwan. And that book is called Flowers in a Mirror, because Ghalib was very fond of illusions. And a mirror is something where you can see your image or any image, but it only exists in the mirror. So this is an idea that Ghalib developed a lot about reality and illusions and what is reality and so on and so forth. But we, want to today talk not about Ghalib the philosopher or Ghalib the difficult poet. Instead, focus on a more relatable part of his personality, which is Ghalib as a poet of the ghazal and which is the poetry of love. So let me begin by sharing a verse that I'm sure all of you must have heard. नींद उसकी है, दिमाग उसका है, रातें उसकी हैं, तेरी जुल्फें जिसके बाजू पर परेशान हो गई. And another very common verse that Ghalib is well known for is इश्क पर जोर नहीं है ये वो आतश गालिब के लगाए न लगे और बुझाए न बने. So with these 2 verses, let me just talk very briefly about what is a ghazal and how did it come to India and to Urdu. So the ghazal originated actually in Arabia in the 7th century, and it was a love poem basically. Ghazal means talking to women, and ghazal means talking about loneliness and love. So it used to be an appendage attached to a longer poem called the Qasida. But then somehow it got separated from that because people were more attracted to the to the ghazal part of the qasida. And then from there it traveled to Persia. And in Persia, actually, in the 10th century, it began to flower and grow. And by the time you get to the 12th century, the ghazal has become a very, very important part of the tradition of love poetry or poetry about love. And from the 12th century, it moved to the court at Delhi and to all parts of India and to all the languages, actually. It was, so poets like to write ghazals because it was, this poem is quintessentially about love. But there's a difference in being a poem about love, because it's not a love poem as such, it is about love. So it kind of sees love as an idea. It is about the idea of love. So the question that I want to ask then is, what is love then, and what is the idea of love? How do we define love? How do we approach love? And I'm teaching a course back home in Virginia. I'm saying back home. My home is, of course, India, but back in the States, I'm teaching this course called The Poetry of Love. And on the first day of class, I ask my students, what is love? And, they just give me very traditional and conventional answers. And, if you push it a little bit further, you find that love can only be defined through the emotion of longing, waiting, desiring. So it is interesting that when you think of love, you think more of arzu, tamanna, khahish, wahshat. All these adjectives come to mind. And one wonders, why is it like that? Why don't we think so much about union? Why do we think about separation when we're thinking about love? So love is actually an idea. It is of course the force of creation, but it is also a path. It is a path on which the seeker begins to travel to find the ultimate goal in life, which could be union with the Creator, which could be union with God, which could be union with the beloved. So what happens is that this path is filled with obstacles. It's not easy to traverse the path of love. And that is why you come across all these synonyms and all these adjectives like Vahshi, Majnoon, a person who is crazy. Love is also associated with these things. And the other thing that about love is that it's seen as all-consuming. इश्क पर जोर नहीं है ये वो आतश गालिब कि लगाए न लगे और बुझाए न बने. So it's a fire. It's like a fire that consumes. It's all-consuming, but it's something that is not really something that you can ignite. But once it is ignited, it's all-consuming. So let's just backtrack a little bit and think of how these emotions are going to be expressed through the ghazal, which is basically a poem made up of 2-line verses. And very often when you hear it being sung, what happens is that the singer pulls out 2 or 3 or 4 verses from a ghazal and sings it to a particular audience. But as a whole, the ghazal is sometimes, there are 3 verses which are about love, then there can be other verses which are about life in general, about creation, about all these other things. And mostly we know them as separate verses. And during the course of my research, I realized that this particular way of treating a ghazal has come from the tradition of orality that we enjoy as a culture and which we are, indulging in right now. That we listen and we respond. But there's a different experience when you see the written word as a text and when you read it. So so the audience shifts, and the engagement also with the text shifts when you read it for yourself and when you hear it, or when you hear it being sung. Keeping all this in mind, just getting back again to this whole idea of a ghazal being a poem, a whole poem, instead of being made up of disparate verses, and somehow bringing it here to link it with Ghalib as an ishqiya shair. I found that there's one very long ghazal which is made up of 15 verses, which is Ghalib's favorite ghazal. And I learnt about it because when I was going through all his different divans, I found that this ghazal consistently was there, and it was always there towards the end of the divan, which means that he wanted to close the divan with this particular ghazal. And so it must have been something really, really powerful. And of course, it is about love. So I think, let me just read the first share from this ghazal, and you will recognize it. मुद्दत हुई है यार को मेहमा किए हुए, मुद्दत हुई है यार को मेहमा किए हुए, जोशे कदह से बज़्म चरागा किए हुए. Does it sound familiar? Yeah. And of course, it has this very, very famous verse, जी ढूंढता है फिर वही फुर्सत के रात दिन, जी ढूंढता है फिर वही फुर्सत के रात दिन, बैठे रहे तसव्वुर जाना किए हुए. So मुद्दत हुई है यार को मेहमा किए हुए, जोशे कदर से बज़्म चरागा किए हुए. So Yar is the beloved, right? One of the things that has also gained a lot of currency in this discourse on the ghazal is the gender of the beloved. And this argument has been made that because there is no gender in Farsi, the word mehboob is genderless. And when it came to Urdu, it continued to be genderless, although Urdu and Hindi have gender. There's a very specific gender in Urdu and Hindi. So why did it continue to be like that? And the answer to this is that by keeping it genderless, it just opens a whole vista of possibilities. The imagination is endless. You can imagine love in all aspects of it. It can be love for, let's say, your favorite dog. I mean, I know dogs, though everybody doesn't love them, but I do. So I think that's why it came to mind. But it can be, it can be love for God, love for all creatures. So the idea of love, coming back to this whole thing about idea, if love is an idea and if the beloved is genderless, what does it give us? It just gives us an idealized relationship as well between the lover and the beloved. So what happens in an idealized relationship is that it's not particular to any person, but it's a more generalized idea of love that becomes transcendent. So whoever reads the verse, ये न थी हमारी किस्मत के विसाले यार होता, अगर और जीते रहते यही इंतज़ार होता. I'm reading it, it's for me. You read it, it becomes for you. Chitra reads it, it becomes for her. So this aspect of this kind of poetry is what makes it so universal, what makes it so close to our hearts, because it's not like a lyric. It's not like a poem that was written for a person. So that's what, when I'm talking about Ghalib's Ishqiya poetry, it doesn't mean that he is writing to a particular beloved, right? He's just writing to all the beloveds, all the people, all the persons, anyone who reads the poem becomes the archetypical lover, and so in this, so there are certain pitfalls in this kind of thing. And the pitfalls are that, as I said in the beginning, that love is a path and the beloved is unattainable to a certain extent, because intizar is something, waiting, longing. All these emotions are the emotions of love. So if fulfillment was to happen very quickly, where will all this go? So the path is winding, it goes uphill, it comes downhill, and the lover goes through all kinds of emotions. His feet become blistered, his hair becomes matted, his clothes become torn, he becomes a Majnoon, children throw stones at him, he's branded, he's punished, and when spring comes, he becomes more crazy, because there's this symbolic relationship between Gulo Bulbul, and so the lover is the Bulbul, and Gul is the beloved. So all of these things are very closely, intertwined. And when I teach my class, I want my students to understand these things so they can enjoy the emotions that are expressed in the ghazal even more. Because when I was a child, I had a problem understanding the extremes in which the lover went in order to seek the beloved. I said, why is he doing all this? And then why is the beloved so cruel? Why is she not giving in to his laments and all of that? But now, of course, I can understand that love is more about longing and less about fulfillment. So the beloved in the ghazal has, her waist is as thin as a hair, her eyebrows are so arched, her eyelashes are like, they are so pointed that they can penetrate the lover's heart. And she shoots arrows from her eyes. There's a lot of blood on the floor. She's actually wielding a sword which she can strike the lover at any time. She's so cruel. तेरे वादे पर जिए हम कि ये जान झूठ जाना, ये खुशी से मर न जाते अगर एतबार होता. So Ghalib is saying, you made a promise to see me, but of course, and I was so thrilled, I was delighted, because I would have died of happiness if I had believed it to be true. तेरे वादे पर जिए हम तो ये जान झूठ जाना कि खुशी से मर न जाते अगर एतबार होता, ये न थी हमारी किस्मत कि विसाल यार होता, अगर और जीते रहते, अगर और जीते रहते. I mean, just look at the subtlety of this. यही इंतज़ार होता. मतलब क्या मतलब इसका ये है कि अगर हम और जीते रहते, यानी ये इंतज़ार और prolonged होता जाता. He doesn't talk about कि वसल होता, right? ये न थी हमारी किस्मत के विसाल यार होता, अगर और, however longer I would have lived, this pursuit, this इंतज़ार would always have been there. अगर और जीते रहते, यही इंतज़ार होता, यही इंतज़ार. So जो इंतज़ार की कैफियत है, the pleasure of इंतज़ार is superior to the pleasure of bustle, to the pleasure of union. And therefore, in the ghazal, the two primary emotions that one sees are hijr and firaq. So firaq means separation and hijr means moving away. And there are a lot of subtleties involved in the way these emotions are presented. I can, give you lots of more shares, but let me just describe a little bit more about Ghalib and his approach to Ishqiya poetry. Ghalib, of course, is just unsurpassable as a complicated poet, as a difficult poet. As a poet, one needs to read with the dictionary by your side, or maybe you need a commentary, or you need someone to explain certain things. But at the same time, he also wrote certain verses or certain poems that were very direct, and they just, hit you the moment you hear them or you read them. And दिल ही तो है न संग खिश्त, दर्द से भर न आए क्यों. रोएंगे हम हजार बार, कोई हमें सताए क्यों। दैर नहीं हरम नहीं, दर नहीं आशियाँ नहीं, बैठे हैं रह गुज़र पे हम, गैर हमें उठाए क्यों। So what we see is, what Ghalib is doing is that he is actually making a slight change in the archetypical lover of the ghazal. He is giving the lover an individualistic persona, which is unique to Ghalib. So often what happens is that Ghalib begins to enunciate love more as a cerebral experience and less as an emotional experience. So what I'm trying to say is that there is a huge range in Ghalib's poetry when it comes to articulating love. And the verses that I just recited for you, they present a lover who is very humble, right? But at the same time, who is also very arrogant. There nahi haram nahi, dar nahi आशियाँ nahi, बैठे हैं रह गुज़र पे हम, गैर हमें उठाए क्यों। मतलब मेरे पास घर नहीं है, मेरे पास कोई ठिकाना नहीं है, लेकिन मैं खुद इतना सेल्फ सफिशिएंट हूँ। मैं जहाँ पे बैठा हूँ, let me be there, let me sit there. Don't come and ask me to get up or move away from this place, because I am the quintessential lover and no one else has the right to make me step away from this. वो अपनी खू न छोड़ेंगे, हम अपनी वज़ह क्यों बदलें। वो अपनी खू न छोड़ेंगे, हम अपनी वज़ह क्यों बदलें। वो तो अपनी आदतें नहीं छोड़ेंगे। वो तो उनकी आदत जो है ज़िद पने की या क्रूअल्टी की या ना मिलने की या झूठ बोलने की, वो तो नहीं छोड़ेंगे। तो हम अपनी वज़ह क्यों बदलें। वाई शुड आई चेंज माई ओन हैबिट्स और माई ओन रिस्पॉन्सेस। सुबुक सर हो के क्यों पूछें तुम हमसे सरगरां क्यों हो। सुबुक सर होना माने टू बी हम्बल। So why should I become humble and then ask why are you angry with me? So here again, you see the lover asserting himself, or giving you a slightly different approach to this whole idea of the archetypical lover in the ghazal. Now, while we are thinking of this whole delicate topic about love, the lover, the beloved, the whole slew of traditional metaphors that are at our disposal to talk about these things, we have to consider the role of language. You know, how does language, what is the role of language in articulating love? I think that is one of the most important parts of this whole poetry, which is, you know, anyone can come up with a love poem, but why do we then look up to Ghalib and Mir and all the other greats? Why do we do that? We do that because they have manipulated language in such a way that other lesser writers can't do that, because all of us have this emotion of love. So if love was just an emotion, or if that could be articulated, and which is a universal emotion, how is it that there are differences in the way it is articulated? And that is because of the use of language. So the role of language is extremely important, and it is through language that one can express the different shades of love. And broadly speaking, there are two broad shades of love in the classical ghazal, and one is called Ishq-e-Majazi, which means earthly love, which is expressed through all these metaphors. and all these emotions. And the other is called ishq haqiqi. Haqiqi means real, true. So ishq haqiqi is real love. It is the true love, and that is the love for God, right? So the beloved becomes God. And it is only through language, through the use of language and a particular kind of a technique which is called iham. It comes to us from Sanskrit, shlesh, where you can have a double speak. You are talking about one thing, but you can be referring to another thing. So it's very clever and it's very tricky, and the ghazal employs it to perfection. So a verse like, I've heard people interpret this verse, ये न थी हमारी किस्मत के विसाल यार होता अगर और जीते रहते यही इंतज़ार होता. You can give it the haqiqi rang as well if you want. It wasn't, I couldn't see God or get close to God, and I could have, पूरी ज़िंदगी हम यही करते रहते. But there's some verses that are explicitly about the earthly beloved, and in those verses, the beloved is in 90% of the case she's a woman. So it's more about the a normal kind of relationship, because there has been some discussion about discussing the fact that early ghazal poets were more into homoerotic emotions. Certainly the homoerotic emotions are there, and because the gender is left ambiguous, you can read homoerotic emotions in it. There's nothing wrong in it. No one is stopping you from doing that, just as no one is stopping you from moving from majazi to haqiqi. So you can always do that. That's not a point of contention. But I'm just bringing it up because when you think of love, you have to think of it in all its shades, and not castigate a particular style of love, writing about love, which may be not something that is socially considered good or bad or something like that. So the ghazal is essentially a poem that builds in the poet's imagination, and it's very free and fluid. So the poet's imagination is fueled by language, the control that a poet has on language, and how effectively a poet can use language to express love. And in this case, we find that Ghalib, who we know to be a very cerebral and erudite and difficult poet, when he comes to writing about love, he can be quite expressive. And I'm going to fall back again on this ghazal, which I quoted, मुद्दत हुई है यार को मेहमा किए हुए. इसमें एक शेर है जो मुझे बहुत पसंद है. ढूंढे है फिर किसी को लबे बाम पर हवस, ढूंढे है फिर किसी को लबे बाम पर हवस, जुल्फे सियाह रुख पे परेशान किए हुए. I'm just giving you a moment to savor it. Baam means terrace. So ढूंढे है फिर किसी को लबे बाम पर हवस. इसमें लबे बाम का बहुत इफेक्टिव यूज़ है लैंग्वेज का, है ना. Edge of the terrace. लबे दरिया, edge of the river. And you can also think of it as the lip of the river. मगर इसमें जो खूबसूरती ढूंढने में है, अभी वो ढूंढ ही रहा है. The lover is searching, ना. ढूंढे है फिर किसी को लबे बाम पर हवस, हवस माने desire, जुल्फे सियाह रुख पे परेशान किए हुए. And so the second line actually gives you the state of the beloved, right? And it paints this beautiful picture essentially of a woman, right? Zulfe siyah rukh pe, my hair is short, unfortunately. So I used to have long hair at one time. Zulfe siyah rukh pe parishan kiye hue. Parishan kiye hue means, tousled hair that has not been combed, but in a state of disarray. So think of Ghalib coming up with this verse. It's this use of language that helps create this wonderful image of just the most perfect image that one can have. And I'm sure all of you who are here are familiar with the fact that the terrace plays an important role in our love poetry. The beloved is always coming on the terrace, and she is projecting her jalwa and her glamour to the lover who is downstairs, because once again there is a chasm that separates them. So the whole idea is this promise. This whole thing is of waiting, longing, wanting. So ढूंढे है फिर किसी को लबे बाम पर हवस, जुल्फे सियाह रुख पे परेशान किए हुए, and then going on, मांगे है फिर किसी को मुकाबिल में आरज़ू. So इस गज़ल में क्या होता है कि बड़ा अच्छा प्रोग्रेशन एक हो रहा है. पहले तो वो कहते हैं कि मुद्दत हुई है यार को मेहमा की हुए, इट्स बीन अ लॉन्ग टाइम. फिर वो कहते हैं कि ढूंढे है फिर किसी को लबे बाम पर हवस. फिर वो कहते हैं मांगे है फिर किसी को मुकाबिल में आरज़ू. आरज़ू यानी लॉन्गिंग, मुकाबिल में यानी सामने, है ना. फिर किसी को मैं देखना चाहता हूँ मेरे सामने, है ना. सुरमे से तेज़ दशनए मिशगा किए हुए. Surma is, the collyrium that you apply. Mishga means eyelashes. So सुरमा लगाने से eyelashes जो हैं और ज़्यादा pronounced हो जाएंगी, आँखें और ज़्यादा खूबसूरत हो जाएंगी, पर उसके साथ साथ तेज़ हो जाएंगी, because जैसे हमने बताया कि वो eyelashes जो हैं वो बहुत ही pointed और बहुत तेज़ होती हैं, वो बिल्कुल penetrate कर जाती हैं. तो इसमें क्या है, मांगे है फिर किसी को मुकाबिल में आरज़ू, सुरमे से तेज़ दशनए मिशगा किए हुए. अगर इस पर आप थोड़ा सा भी गौर कीजिए तो इसमें देखिए कि जब मुकाबिल में है महबूब तो आमने सामने आँखों में बातें होंगी ना. पहले तो वो लबे बाम पे थे, वो नीचे थे, अब वो सामने आ गए. तो अब जब सामने आ गए तो वो उनकी आईलैशेस बहुत ही तेज़ हैं, शार्पन हो गई हैं सुरमा लगाने से, तो वो सीधे सीधे पेनिट्रेट कर जाती हैं उनके दिल में. इस तरह की शायरी गालिब से हम पता नहीं क्यों पहले एसोशिएट नहीं करते थे, लेकिन क्योंकि आई डोंट नो, हम लोग की फेमिलियरिटी जिन वर्सेस से हो जाती है. और कभी कभी ऐसा होता है कि हम सुनते हैं जो तो उसको लुत्फ़ लेते हैं, लेकिन अगर कोई समझा दे तो उसका लुत्फ़ और बढ़ जाता है. So next time you listen to somebody singing these verses, just savor them a little bit more, and I hope I will be rewarded in introducing you to this to Ghalib's Ishqiya poetry. And again, from this ghazal, this verse, which is, I think, universal. जी ढूंढता है फिर वही फुर्सत के रात दिन, बैठे रहे तसव्वुर जाना किए हुए. I mean, this is just the most perfect, I would say, expression of longing, desiring, thinking about this whole idea of loving. Right? जी ढूंढता है फिर वही फुर्सत के रात दिन. फुर्सत के रात दिन, इसमें क्या है, एक बहुत अच्छा सा प्ले है. अगर आप यहाँ कॉमा लगा दीजिए, जी ढूंढता है फिर वही फुर्सत, कॉमा लगा दीजिए, कि रात दिन बैठे रहे तसव्वुर जाना क्यों. दोनों तरह से आप उसको पढ़ सकते हैं, है ना. एक तो ये कि वो फुर्सत के रात दिन ढूंढ रहा है, दूसरे ये कि वो फुर्सत ढूंढ रहा है कि रात दिन करते रहे. तो कितना, मतलब क्या कमाल है, आप समझ लीजिए. This is what is exactly, this is what I was trying to help you understand, कि play of words is as important as the emotional content, So although we receive the ghazal, we think of it as this poem about love, it's also embellished or made even more what can I say, unforgettable, you know, because of the use of words in this way, and somehow uh, it's it's glide from one meaning to the other meaning, and smoothness through which the poet navigates. So let's see. I guess I've been talking for some time. I would love to have a participatory experience, you know, sharing, talking to you. You ask your questions and I will respond. No, I want it in the middle. I want to, you know, have the questions and then I want to explain those things. And I also want to focus on what the audience wants to hear.
ने प्रोग्रेशन के बारे में बताया था
जी, जी।
मुद्दत हुई वाली गजल में इसमें आप इंटेंसिटी ऑफ इमोशंस का प्रोग्रेशन भी देख रहे हैं क्या पहले हवस है फिर आरज़ू है
असल में हवस जो है वो बहुत बदनाम हो गई है आजकल कि हम लोग हवस में एक वी इमेजिन सम हॉरिबल वहशी काइंड ऑफ थिंग, बट वहशत और हवस और ये सारे जो वर्ड्स हैं ना जो क्लासिकल गज़ल में आते हैं वो दे आर नॉट इम्ब्यूड विद दैट काइंड ऑफ पैशन दैट इज़ a carnal or animalistic passion. It's more of a passion that is like a restlessness. So a havas is more like longing and desire mixed together. It's not lust alone. Okay? Yeah. Huh.
Like for example
Huh. Yes, yes. I I don't think that all his ghazals have a crescendo. Only some ghazals do have a crescendo where he uses his own, you know, his own name. जैसे गालिब, you know, ये जो है इश्क पर जोर नहीं है ये वो आतिश गालिब के लगाए न लगे और बुझाए न बचे, या आते हैं गैब से मज़ामी ख्याल में गालिब सरीर खामा, एक तरह से वो कैप कर देते हैं, मतलब क्रेशेंडो तो नहीं करते पर वो कैप करते हैं तो हाँ 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 जी 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 हाँ। मगर ये जो पर्टिकुलर गज़ल हमने चूज़ की इसीलिए हमने हमने इसका इंतखाब हमने इसीलिए किया कि इसमें एक तरह का प्रोग्रेशन नज़र आता है, और दूसरी बात ये है कि ये हमेशा दीवान के आखिर में है, तो उसकी एक ख़ास अहमियत है कि ऐसा क्यों, मतलब क्लोजिंग में आपने इतनी खूबसूरत गज़ल रख दी बिकॉज सो दैट इट लीव्स द रीडर विद दिस इमोशन. So let me just answer the first question, which was incidentally raised by my sister. She's here with me, and we both grew up as daughters of Shamsur Rahman Farooqi, who is a very, very, you know, larger than life figure as an Urdu critic, and he taught us Urdu at home because we were going to an English medium school and Urdu was not offered there, so we were taught Urdu at home. And I'm so grateful that he took so much time and patience. So जब वो हम लोग को पढ़ाते थे तो वो हम लोग को बहुत सी बातें बहुत बड़ी बड़ी बता देते थे उस वक्त जो हमारे समझ में नहीं आती थी, बिल्कुल भी नहीं समझ में आती थी, और लेकिन हम लोग उसको मतलब we would just take it as fun and play, you know. And as we grew older and both of us started our careers in literature, my sister is a professor of English and I was actually trained as a historian, but I gravitated towards literature because that was my first calling. I mean, that was something that I enjoyed. So you know, when you are working with something that you really love, it becomes easier it becomes easier to engage with it. So anyway, both of us, as we grew older, we began to understand, and we then developed our own ideas, and we often used to have conversations with him. But this whole thing about love being a wound, you know, and this idea that there's nothing worse than forgetting how to love, right? दिल से मिटना तेरे अंगुश्त हिनाई का ख्याल हो गया गोश्त से नाखून का जुदा हो जाना. इसमें हम आपको बताएं बहुत सारी खूबसूरती हैं. एक तो ये है अंगुश्त हिनाई, दैट मीन्स द फिंगर दैट इज़ हिना जिसमें लगी हुई, और हिना का रंग लाल होता है. गोश्त से जब नाखून को जुदा करते हैं तो वो जो इमेज हमारी आँख में, हमारी नज़रों में आ रहा है कि वो इट्स ऑब्वियसली अ वेरी ब्लडीड इमेज, राइट, पुलिंग द नेल आउट ऑफ द फ्लैश, एंड देन दिस होल थिंग अबाउट द अंगुश्त हिनाई, दैट इज द थॉट इज अबाउट द finger which has the henna has become for me like pulling my nail out. So there's all this connection, right, between the two things. It's just, it's very hair raising. But the idea that to lose that imagination, to lose that feeling. Faiz has written also quite a bit about this kind of emotion. But never reached really the heights that Ghalib was able to accomplish. इसी गज़ल में एक और शेर है, क्या था वो, कुफले अबजद की तरह, जो सूरत कुफले अबजद जुदा हो जाना. सो लाइक दैट नंबर लॉक जो होता है वो जब मिल जाता है तो वो खुल जाता है, तो जुदा हो जाता है. तो मेरी किस्मत में भी ऐसे ही था कि जब मैं तुमसे मिला तो उसके बाद वो मैं जुदा हो गया. तो सो आई एम जस्ट थ्रोइंग दीज. हाँ हाँ, या So let me just close with, leave you with a few thoughts about this whole idea that the ghazal is not a typical love poem. It's a poem about love, and so it represents all the shades of love. And the beloved is cruel and desirable because the idea is that she or he is unattainable. And because it is unattainable, it feeds to intizar, it feeds to longing. And so love then produces a wound that doesn't heal. गालिब के इस पे भी बहुत से शेर हैं कि जब वो स्कैब बनने लगा तो उसको खोद, हाँ, नाखून से you scrape it off because you don't want it to heal. You don't want the wound to heal. You want the wound to be there. Yeah. नाखून न बढ़ जाएंगे क्या? So जब तक wound भरेगा नहीं, मेरे नाखून बढ़ जाएंगे, मैं उसको नोच दूंगा.
Can I interrupt here? Because we seem to be going in the direction of only unrequited love.
Yes.
There's another element of love, which is the pleasure of giving selflessly.
Yes.
And this is only unrequited love. It's not love really.
It's, well, yeah, it's not unrequited. Sometimes it is, sometimes sometimes the poet does get a letter from the beloved. It's not always unrequited. But the whole conceit is that you have to experience, love as pain.
I don't think I agree with
The
that.
idea. I'm just coming to this idea that pain has a positive value. So pain as a cleanser, pain as a positive experience which unites everyone. If it was leading to fulfillment or something, that would be very momentary. And I don't think it is unrequited love in that sense that we understand it in English. So it's not exactly unrequited love. It is just the idea of love. What is love? What is...
That is where I said the other part of it is the pleasure out of giving selflessly.
Huh.
That is also love.
Yes, of course. So the act of loving itself is selflessness. Yes, yeah. I agree. That part I do agree. Okay, so let's just. हाँ please please आप कीजिए.
कोई मेरे दिल से पूछे
जी जी जी. तेरे तीर नीम
तेरे
कश
तीरे नीम कश को ये खलिश कहाँ से होती जो जिगर के
जिगर
पार
के
होता.
पार होता.
अगर इसमें कॉमा अगर डाल दी जाए तो थोड़ा सा एक अलग अंदाज हो जाता है उसमें कि कोई मेरे दिल से पूछे
जी.
तेरे तीरे नीम कश को ये खलिश कहाँ से होती.
मतलब तीर को कहाँ से खलिश होती.
तो नहीं तो वो मेरे दिल से पूछेगा कोई
हाँ.
मतलब नहीं है. कोई मेरे दिल से पूछे दैट मीन्स माई हार्ट इज इंटैक्ट. आई हैव नो प्रॉब्लम्स.
हाँ 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 हाँ. Yes.
तेरे तीरे नीम कश को ये खलिश
I
कहाँ से
know.
होती जो जिगर के पार होता.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
It's not my problem. The problem is with you.
It's interesting. नहीं, it's open to interpretation and it's multi-layered and you can keep on peeling the layers and have getting more and more enjoyment out of it. So yeah, yes, yeah. The more you read, the more you enjoy. The more you, हाँ.
उम्र मेरी हो गई सर्फ बहार हुस्न यार, गर्दिश रंग चमन है माहो साल अंदलीब. It's a less known couplet of his. I haven't really been able to locate the whole ghazal, but very likely he's talking about a beloved over here, a real beloved. Could you elaborate on that? I'll repeat the couplet. Umr meri ho gayi sarf bahar husn yaar. Yeah, it's definitely a woman. Gardish range chaman hai maho sale andalib.
Why do you think it's for a particular beloved? It could be.
I'm because it's bahar husn yaar.
हाँ, सरफे
हो गई
बहार.
मेरी हो गई मेरी उम्र सरफ बहार हुस्न यार. सरफे बहार हुस्न यार. It is
हाँ,
सरफे.
मतलब मैंने वेस्ट कर दी अपनी.
Yeah, मैंने सारी उम्र गंवा दी अपनी.
हाँ.
And गर्दिश रंग चमन है माहो साले अंदलीब. अंदलीब वैसे masculine होता है, feminine होता
नहीं,
है.
अंदली माने बुलबुल तो
So is it masculine in Persian or feminine?
उसमें तो कोई जेंडर ही नहीं है ना.
Okay.
हाँ, फारसी में तो कोई जेंडर नहीं. अंदलीब माने बुलबुल होता है और बुलबुल भी फारसी का ही वर्ड है. क्योंकि हमारे यहाँ जो बुलबुल होती है उसका नाम कुछ और होता था, मगर जब ये इतना पॉपुलर हो गया तो हम लोगों ने भी उसको बुलबुल कहना शुरू कर दिया. तो बुलबुल एक इज़ अ फारसी वर्ड एंड असल में जो गार्डन का जो कॉन्सेप्ट है ना, वो गार्डन इज़ द गार्डन ऑफ द वर्ल्ड. और जिस तरह के मौसम बदलते हैं हमारे साथ भी, हमारी ज़िंदगी में ऊंच नीच, खुशी गम, उसी तरह गार्डन में बदलते रहते हैं मौसम. और दो जो मेन मौसम है वो एक तो ख़िज़ा है विच इज़ यू नो व्हेन ऑल द लीव्स फॉल एंड ऑल द फ्लावर्स आर ब्लोन अवे, एंड देन द स्प्रिंग. So, but this whole idea is about regeneration, and that love is always being regenerated. So it never dies, it's always reborn. And so just like in the garden there's khiza and there's sarma, there's winter, and then again it's followed by spring. And the other thing is that the bulbul lays eggs. Okay. So a new lover is born every spring. It's very, very beautiful. This idea of the egg of the bulbul and how the new lover is born. And even when the bulbul is being caught by the shikari and put in a cage, the bulbul is only singing about. तो गालिब का बस एक और शेर मैं बताती हूँ आपको, उससे मैं क्लोज करती हूँ इस टॉक को. हूँ गर्मी निशात तसव्वुर से नग़्मा संज. ये शेर जो है इन्होंने डिस्कार्ड कर दिया था तो लोगों को मालूम नहीं है, लेकिन ये बड़ा ही उनकी शायरी के बारे में है. हूँ गर्मी निशात तसव्वुर से नग़्मा संज. गर्मी माने वार्मथ, निशात माने जॉय, तसव्वुर माने इमेजिनेशन, नग़्मा संज माने मैं आई सिंग फ्रॉम द जॉय ऑफ इमेजिनेशन. मैं अंदलीब गुलशने ना आफरीदा हूँ. I am the bulbul of the garden that has yet to be created. So just think, it's mind-boggling. I'm the bulbul of the garden that has yet to be created. So I am. Who am I? But I'm just waiting for the right people to listen to my verses and to enjoy them, and so on and so forth. So with these words, I think I'm going to stop here. And if you have any more questions, or if we have, I think we have 10 more minutes to talk. So I'm happy to talk to you.
Ma'am, how and where do you find the matter and the subject of love for Ghalib's poetry in the modern time? Do you see the subject matter that is available in the modern kinds of love that we all see around us?
Yeah, this is a good question. So it's, you know, I personally believe that there is an evolution that happens in language and ideas. There are some ideas that are universal through time and space, but like in modern days, we have different means of communication, but we are still quoting the same poetry. We are still, Ghalib is being quoted and all these other poets are being quoted. So why is this happening? Why does this happen? Why don't these poets go away? Why doesn't this go away? Why don't we forget it? So there must be something that makes it immortal, right? And this brings us to the idea that there are certain emotions that are immortal. We can clothe them in different forms, we can use language and give them different clothes, like new wine in old bottles or something like that. But there is still a whole core that time cannot erase. So, does that answer your question? Yes. Yeah, sure.
I was just curious. I don't know much about Urdu poetry or Ghalib, so thank you very much for introducing me to this. I was just curious, was Ghalib writing different things as he grew older? I mean, the early poetry, does it look and sound different from
Yeah.
the later, and how? Maybe you could.
Yeah, good question. So, in the beginning, when Ghalib was younger, he was more ambitious in trying to be unusual and individualistic. And so he was drawing on more on Persian models. There was a kind of school of Persian poetry called Taza Goi, which means writing in the new style. And basically, that style was a heavy mixture of Indian and Persian. So a lot of Indic ideas from the Vedanta and from other, philosophical ideas were absorbed into Persian. And this was called Taza Goi because it was very new in Persian. So when Ghalib started writing Urdu poetry, he didn't follow Mir's style. He followed this new style. And so he made his poetry very exotic. And then again, for 20 years, he only wrote in Persian. Then he comes back to Urdu, and when he comes back in 1850, then his writing becomes simpler. I don't think the ideas of love would change, but in the early poetry, he was more philosophical, I would say, about love. And he was speaking more about illusion, ephemerality, and things like that, subjects that were more abstract. And then when he comes back, he's more straightforward. I don't think his ideas of love as such changing. It's just the way of presentation. One could, actually, देखिए ऐसा होता क्या है, जब कोई भी चीज़ आप प्रैक्टिस करते हैं बहुत सालों सालों तक, तो जितना प्रैक्टिस आप करेंगे उतनी पॉलिश्ड हो जाएगी. तो जब हम 16 साल के हैं, हम शायरी लिख रहे हैं, और जब हम 64 साल के हैं, हम ही जब शुरू में लेक्चर देते थे तो हम थोड़े नर्वस होते थे. अब हम बिल्कुल रिलैक्स्ड हैं, है ना. तो हम जितने रिलैक्स्ड होंगे, हम उतना सिंपलिस्टिक वे में मुश्किल चीज़ों को समझा सकते हैं. हाँ. नहीं, वो बात नहीं है. वक्त के साथ उनके आइडियाज़ बिल्कुल नहीं बदले, सिवाय इसके कि उन्होंने उसको एक आसान जामा पहना दिया. लैंग्वेज को उन्होंने अपनी सिंपल कर दिया, क्योंकि उनको ये स्किल आ गई कि किस तरह से हम सिंपल लैंग्वेज में उसी बात को कह सकते हैं, मुश्किल सी बात को हम आसान तरह से कैसे कह सकते हैं। क्योंकि जब आप उनके पूरी पूरी शायरी को एज अ होल देखिए तो उसमें सब इंटरस्पर्स्ड है, आसान पोइट्री भी है बीच बीच में, मतलब जो उनका तर्ज है ना वो हमेशा यही है कि हम किस तरह से चीज़ों को कॉम्प्लिकेट कर दें। जो क्वेश्चंस हैं वो इतने सिंपल नहीं हैं, उनको हम किस तरह से कहें कि ये किताब नहीं है बल्कि ये तो डायरी है, हम अगर कह दें तो एक छोटी सी चेंज हमने कर दिया उसके परसेप्शन में।
Good morning. Very interesting lecture for something that I've been introduced to. But this whole idea of Ghalib that he wrote on love, of course he wrote on many other things, but today we have focused on love. Did he have a muse in his life? I mean, was there a layered lover in his life, in his personal life? Or was he always rejected by women and, you know, how was it?
I don't think he was rejected by women as such. How could he be? He was so witty. He was very good looking. We have descriptions of him. Yes. चंपाई रंग था उनका, तो वो जो बहुत ही परफेक्ट एक तरह का होता है ना, जो हम लोग के यहाँ कॉम्प्लेक्शन होता है चंपाई, like a camellia flower, and he had very long fingers, very artistic, and he had very penetrating eyes, so I'm sure he was very good looking as far as I've been able to know. And then he frequented one singing dancing girl जिसके साथ उनका रोमांस था, और वहाँ पर क्या होता था कि वो दिल्ली के जो कोतवाल थे वो भी उसके आशिक थे, तो वो वहाँ जाते थे, तो उनको पसंद नहीं करते थे गालिब का आना, तो उन्होंने गालिब को फिर इम्प्लिकेट कर दिया था गैम्बलिंग में. दैट्स हाउ ही वाज अरेस्टेड एंड पुट बिहाइंड द बार्स. So there was all this exciting romance going on in his life, but he was a very devoted husband. Yes, yeah. They had, there was this tragedy in his life, which was that none of the children lived beyond a year. So that was very tragic. And then later on, he adopted two of his nephews, his wife's nephews. He adopted them and he doted on them. So he was fond of his wife. ऐसी कोई बात नहीं है. But obviously he was a man of his age, जिसको हम कहते हैं. जी हाँ बिल्कुल जी स्टाइल वही जी, कंटेंट नहीं चाहिए.
एक सवाल है कि उसका जवाब तो एक दो सवाल पहले मिल गया, उनकी कॉम्प्लेक्सिटी पे उनकी जो पोइट्री में है.
हाँ.
तो क्या वो एक डेलिबरेट अटेम्प्ट है एक चीज़, क्योंकि उनके शेर में, अशार में, जैसा आपने बोला कि प्ले ऑफ वर्ड्स है.
जी.
तो प्ले ऑफ वर्ड्स तो एक कॉमा का आपने जैसे जिक्र किया, वो कई शेर में मिलता भी है, जैसे वो वीरानी सी वीरानी है. और मगर
को देख के घर याद आया.
उसमें मिलता है. वैसा प्ले ऑफ वर्ड्स बाकी जगह जैसे मीर के यहाँ भी हमें मिल जाता है. बट कुछ शेर एकदम जिक्सॉ पजल की तरह हैं, जो खुलते हैं, और मतलब उनके कई मीनिंग बहुत देर में तारी होते हैं.
जी.
जैसे कशाकश हाय हस्ती पे, करे क्या सही आज़ादी, हुई जंजीर मौजे आपको फुर्सत रवानी की. या फिर और दूसरा एक सवाल मेरा ये है कि ये कितना बोरोड है बेदिल की शायरी से. जैसे उनके अशार में मुझे उतनी फारसी आती नहीं, बट जो दो एक शेर पढ़े वहाँ मुझे दिखता है वो रंग. जैसे कि जिबस लबरेज हसरत दारद, इमशब शौक दीदारम, चकद आई नहा बरखाक अगर मिशगान बिफ शारम. तो ये क्या कितना कंक्लूसिवली हम कह सकते हैं कि वहाँ से बोरोड है ये स्टाइल, और ये कॉम्प्लेक्सिटी कितनी डेलिबरेट है अपार्ट फ्रॉम द प्ले ऑफ वर्ड्स. ये दो सवाल हैं.
It's a very good literary question, and I would love to answer it. So definitely he was in the beginning trying to be as complicated as possible and as complex as possible. So he would search for far off expressions from Farsi and bring them into his verses, which people wouldn't understand. And then unless and until you knew what that particular phrase was, you wouldn't be able to understand. जैसे कि बहुत सारे में
नक्श फरियादी में भी ऐसी बात है.
हाँ, नक्श फरियादी के अलावा जो बहुत सारी जो पोइट्री उन्होंने डिस्कार्ड कर दी, उसमें इसके बेतहाशा एग्जाम्पल्स हैं. हम अपनी किताब को प्रमोट नहीं करेंगे, लेकिन इट्स अवेलेबल आउटसाइड, यू शुड बाय इट, बिकॉज दैट बुक इज ऑल अबाउट, दिस इज द फर्स्ट बुक, द सेकेंड बुक इज जस्ट कम आउट. So that the second book is all about this, why he's bringing in all these unfamiliar expressions, which you have to know the old Persian tradition in order to unlock those verses. So that is one thing. अब जैसे नक्श फरियादी है किसकी, उसमें भी तो वो खुद गालिब ने एक्सप्लेन किया कि जब वो जाते थे कंप्लेन करने तो वो पेपर रोब्स पहन के जाते थे. अब भाई जिसको नहीं मालूम वो कैसे समझेगा इसका मतलब क्या है. तो डिलिबरेटली कॉम्प्लेक्सिटी वो सीख करते थे शुरू में. और बेदिल से तो जाहिर बात है ही वॉज वेरी इन्फ्लुएंस, बिकॉज जो उनका पहला दीवान है 1816 का, इट इज़ डेडिकेटेड टू बेदिल. पूरा शुरू में और आखिर में दोनों में कोलोफॉन है, जिसमें कि उन्होंने कहा है कि बेदिल को शुक्रिया अदा किया है कि आपके ही से ही हम इंस्पायर हुए हैं. लेकिन एक फर्दर बात हम ये बताएंगे कि जैसे शायरी में क्या होता है कि कोई भी एक थीम है, उसको आपने ले लिया, that theme doesn't really belong to you, okay? It's a theme, right? It's an idea. Anyone can take it. So we can't allow ourselves to be judged from Western standards कि अरे ओरिजिनलिटी क्या है. हमारे यहाँ ओरिजिनलिटी ये है कि हम किसी आइडिया को कितना पॉलिश कर देते हैं. अगर किसी और ने उसी आइडिया को कहा है और हम उसको लेकर के उसको एक और लेवल तक ले जाते हैं, तो फिर वो हम ये नहीं कहेंगे कि हमने उससे बोरो किया है. ठीक है, हमने बोरो किया है, बट आई हैव गॉन बियॉन्ड दैट, है ना. फिर कोई और आएगा, दैट पर्सन कैन ऑल्सो टेक दैट आइडिया एंड गो बियॉन्ड इट. इसीलिए हमारी शायरी में, हमारे ट्रेडिशन में जो थीम्स हैं, वो उस पर आप बहुत सारे शेर निकाल सकते हैं, है ना. एक पर्टिकुलर थीम है इंतज़ार की, उस पर आप खंगालिए, हर एक के दीवान में आपको मिल जाएंगे बहुत सारे सिमिलर, मिलते जुलते, लेकिन कुछ बहुत ज़्यादा अच्छे हैं. तो खैर बेदिल तो बहुत ही बड़े सूफ़ी थे. और Ghalib was not a Sufi, he was not a philosopher, or he didn't believe in all those things, but he believed in those ideas. He did carry out the practice, but he did borrow the ideas because they appealed to him.
We need to.
Yes. Of course. Zauq in himself is a brilliant poet. But this rivalry between Ghalib and Zauq has kind of painted Zauq in a poor light. But he was a master poet, and अगर आप Zauq को अपने आप में पढ़िए तो you will enjoy him a lot. And sometimes he surpasses Ghalib actually. So this is actually a fun thing to do, जो हम लोग करते हैं कि दो शेर ले लिए सिमिलर से और फिर हमने कहा कि किसने ज़्यादा अच्छा कहा. तो उसमें भी बड़ा मज़ा आता है कि हाँ भाई, अब एक ही गाना लता ने गाया, आशा ने गाया, किसने ज़्यादा अच्छा गाया. दोनों की आवाज़ें बहुत अच्छी हैं, है ना, दोनों बहुत बड़े सिंगर्स हैं, पर देयर आर सम सॉन्ग्स दैट आशा डज बेटर देन लता. तो ठीक है भाई, थीम है, हमने ज़्यादा अच्छा कह दिया. यस. हाँ, अच्छा, ओके. या एग्जैक्टली. हाँ. हमने बल्कि ये गज़ल जो मोमिन की है, वो जो हम में तुम में करार था, तुम्हें याद हो, वो बेगम अख्तर ने गाई है, फिर उसको किसी और ने कह रहा है, गुलाम अली ने है, मेहंदी हसन ने. हर एक को आप सुनिए तो वो डिफरेंट साउंड करती है, बिल्कुल अलग हो जाती है. हाँ, ऑफ कोर्स, यही तो. तो म्यूज़िक के भी ट्रिगर्स होते हैं ना, अपने ट्रिगर्स होते हैं म्यूज़िक के, वो ज़्यादा इमोशनली हमें इन्फ्लुएंस कर देते हैं. माई होल रिसर्च एक्चुअली, द डायरेक्शन इन विच आई एम गोइंग नाउ इज़ लुकिंग एट ओरैलिटी एंड टेक्स्ट. सुनने और पढ़ने में क्या फ़र्क है. जब हम किसी चीज़ को पढ़ते हैं तो हम किस तरह से उसको रिसीव करते हैं, जब हम सुनते हैं तो किस तरह रिसीव करते हैं. और जब दोनों का मर्जर हो जाता है, आई थिंक दैट्स गोइंग टू बी माई टॉक टुमारो एट द यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ लखनऊ. आई एम गोइंग टू टॉक अबाउट दैट एक्चुअली, how what happens when an oral tradition through printing becomes written. When you buy a book, it becomes your possession, and when you read that book and when you listen to someone reciting that thing, what is the difference between the two, and how do you deal with that? So that is in the direction which I'm proceeding now, looking at that. Thank you so much, and
Thank you.
Oh, sure, please ask me. Yeah, yeah.
Basically, it's a very non-literary question,
अरे
but
कोई बात
I
नहीं.
was feeling shy to ask you.
हाँ,
So, me, my wife, my little family,
हाँ,
we don't understand the words, the heavy words which are there.
हाँ.
But when you talk in that language, the way you spoke
जी.
about, we are enjoying it a lot. I mean, what is that thing which is, it's absolutely attracting. We are feeling so enamored by this, blissful in fact.
Recitation, जी. Actually, I was taught as a child how to do it, and कुछ लोग तो उसको पढ़ते ही नहीं है. मतलब मौजूनियत एक चीज़ होती है ना कि उसमें जो उसका जो मीटर है और जो रिदम है वो सही आना चाहिए. तो जब वो नहीं आता सही तो वो थोड़ा सा अटपटा सा हो जाता है. तो उसको सही लाने के लिए मतलब जिन लोगों की म्यूज़िक में ट्रेनिंग होती है वो तो खैर बहुत अच्छा ही पढ़ देते हैं क्योंकि उनके अंदर इन्नेट होता है वो चीज़. लेकिन हम और आप जैसे लोग जो शायद म्यूजिशियंस नहीं है, माई फ्रेंड इज सिटिंग हियर, यू नो, शी इज़ चित्रा, शी सिंग्स ब्यूटिफुली. सो एनीवे शी मस्ट बी सिंगिंग गालिब, आई नो, आई हैव हर्ड हर सिंग. तो वो लोग तो बहुत ही अच्छा पढ़ देते हैं, लेकिन हम और आप जो हैं अगर थोड़ी सी ध्यान दें so we can get it right and we can enunciate it properly and enjoy it. Yeah, thank you so much for asking this. And
Thank you. Thank you.
From all of us at Ashikana Lucknow, we are grateful to Dr. Farooqi to taking us on this marvelous journey of Ghalib's Ishqiya, and to you, our audience, for being with us on a Sunday morning. And thanks to Professor Rizvi for your hand-holding and marvelous introduction.